Okay, what you're going to learn in this tutorial is how to take a rig that comes with Blender, how to modify that rig to your uses. You're going to take some bones away from that rig, add some bones to that rig. You are going to learn how to set up inverse kinematics that allows you to do movements like this. You're going to be able to do from those inverse kinematics movements like this. You're going to be shown how to set up a advanced ankle rig where you basically can have your rig move like this. You're going to be set up how to use constraints to rig your hand, so basically you can control your fingers with one bone like this. You're going to be shown how to adjust the rig to give the rig a hip movement. You're also going to be told what weight painting is, as well as how to do weight painting, as well as how to do some visual setups for weight painting. If you're not used to the tutorials on this channel, this tutorial is a longer tutorial. If you're a beginner, don't be afraid of doing this tutorial. I do these tutorials in a step-by-step fashion where I explain what I'm doing. I also try to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. And if you're serious about learning how to rig, I recommend you work your way through this tutorial. Hi, this is Ali Rango of Little Guy CGI, and today I'm going to show you how to rig a male character mesh in Blender 2.8. So let's get started. Okay, one of the things that you definitely want to do to follow along with this tutorial is you want to go to your upper left. You want to left click on edit. You want to go from edit down to preferences. You want to scroll to the bottom of preferences and then see this where it says rigging rigify. You want to put a check mark right here. Okay, what you see in front of you is the result of a few other tutorials. First, I showed how to basically sculpt a male character mesh. I then showed how to retopologize it, and that's pretty much what you see right here. Okay, if you want to work your way through this tutorial using your own character mesh, that's fine. However, if you want to use this actual character mesh, what you can do is go to littleguycgi.com. If you come here and then you left click on assets, and then you scroll down, you'll see this characters right here. If you click here, you'll be taken to a link where you can download that character mesh. If you want to sign up to this webpage, you can also check out things like the newsletter that we write for Little Guy CGI, and just goes over some of the different things going on as far as working with 3D models. Also, taking these 3D models and using them in other things like the free game engine GDevelop 5. Okay, so what actually is rigging? Rigging is a way of taking a character mesh like this, putting a skeleton in that character mesh, and then using that skeleton to move the character mesh around. Okay, so the way this is going to work is we're going to place the armature inside of this character mesh. We'll try to have the armature fit as closely as possible inside of this mesh. We'll then do things to the armature to make it more easily animatable. So we'll set up things like inverse kinematics. Once we have the rig set up the way we want it to be set up, what we'll do is we will then attach this mesh to that armature, and that will allow us to control and animate this character mesh. Okay, so first we need to bring in the armature. Remember I told you to go to Edit, Preferences, Rigify. Basically, we can take a bone and build an armature to put into this, and we can make that armature however we want it to be. However, since this is a humanoid form, there is a thing in Blender, Rigify, and Rigify is a way that you can use a humanoid armature. There's actually also a system used where you can automatically use Rigify to set up that armature for you. I use the armature from Rigify, but I tend to set up the armature how I want it to be set up. I don't use the kind of auto rigging of Rigify, and the reason why is when I set up the armature, I understand how the armature works. So because I understand how the armature works, when I go to animate the character, I find it's much easier for me to animate the character that I set up the armature for. Okay, so we are going to bring in the armature. Now, it's important where this 3D cursor is at. This 3D cursor is right in the center of our scene. You want that to be in the center, so your armature comes right into the center of your scene. If this 3D cursor isn't in the center of your scene, you can hold Shift and then press C. That'll put the 3D cursor in the center of your scene. So with the 3D cursor in the center of our scene, what I'm going to do is hold Shift, press A. This brings up our Add To menu. I'm then going to go to Armature. And now when we go to Armature, we can see this single bone. That's where, like I was telling you, we could build up an armature ourselves. We would this is available even without the Rigify. You could build your own armature. I don't see why you would want to do that though when you have it's a humanoid form. And there's all kinds of different options in here. What we want to do is we want to go to the human meta rig, right? And we're going to left click here. And you can see there's the human meta rig armature that popped in right there. Okay, so we're going to have to resize this. However, before we do that, we want to make it so we can see this armature through our mesh here, right? In Blender, there used to be a thing called X-ray. Now that's called in front. So I'm going to click, looks like a square right here. I'm going to scroll down. Okay, here we go. So see this right here where we see in front. When I click that, now you can see there is the armature showing through the mesh. Okay, so what we want to do is go to our manipulator. So I'm moving my mouse to the upper left, clicking on, it's called move. I'm going to push this armature down. So what I'm doing is there's a line right beneath our character mesh right here, pretty much lining the armature right up along that that line. Okay, so with the armature in that position, I'm going to press S to scale, and you can see that the armature is, growing, scaling up right from that line that we placed it on. So as I scale this up right now, I am looking at the shoulders is where my attention is. So the neck and the shoulders right here is where I'm looking at. Okay, so what we're going to do now is look to our upper left. We're currently in object mode. We're selected on the armature. We're going to left click to the upper left. Then we're going to go to edit mode by left clicking on edit mode. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. Okay, I picked this option as far as the armature to use. However, there's extra armature parts that I don't use. I'm going to press the N key to take that menu away. So when I rig a face, I rig it in my own way. So this is set up to help you out with other rigging methods. However, for myself, I'm not going to use this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the right of the screen. I'm going to click on our tools bar. See where we see X-axis mirror here? I'm going to put a check mark there so that what we do to one side of the mesh, or not the mesh, the armature is done to the other side of the armature. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm then going to hold Shift, press Z to go to wireframe mode. Okay, I made that wireframe, but not the... Okay, I guess it did. I'm going to hold Control, hold the right mouse button, and draw a lasso select. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to grab these different face parts of the armature. I don't want to grab this. I want these face parts here, which I have. So I'm going to press X to bring up our delete button. I'm then going to choose bones to delete. I'm going to hold the mouse button to turn to the side. I'm going to hold Control, hold the right mouse button, and draw lasso select here. I'm then going to press X to bring up our delete button and then choose bones to delete. Now, because I have this X-axis mirror, when I select it here, the bones on the other side were also, the bones I had selected here and then deleted, when I did that, these bones were also deleted because of this X-axis mirror here. Okay, this bone here as well, I'm not planning on using. So I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose bones to delete. I'm going to hold Control, hold the right mouse button to draw lasso select. Oh, I don't want that. There we go. So now I'm going to, with this bone here selected, so this is in a sense selected as well because of this X-axis mirror. I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose bones to delete because I wasn't planning on using those bones as well. Okay, I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to click here, press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose bones to delete. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan this bone right here. I just clicked on it. I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose bones to delete. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. If you want to rotate in Blender, Blender 2.8 is so nice because if you didn't have a middle mouse button before, that was a serious issue. However, now if you left click here and just left click and drag, you can easily rotate your view. If you have a number keypad, you can use the number keypad. Like 1 will take you to front view, 3 will take you to right view, 7 will take you to top view, or you can come to where we see view here, and you can go to viewpoint. You can also click on these circles here. They'll also let you get around. I'm going to hold Shift, press Z just to come back to solid mode. I'm then going to go to view, go to viewpoint, and then select front to go back to front view. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button so we can just see our whole armature as well as our whole character mesh. Speaking about the views, typically when I pan, I hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. However, you can go to this hand and you can use this to pan as well now. And then I'll hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in and out. You can also left click here and do the same thing. So that is very nice. Okay, as far as the bones, this is the typical setup I like to start off with. So I do want to, I'm gonna holding Control as well as the middle mouse button to pan, Shift as well as the middle mouse button, Control the middle mouse button to zoom, and Shift the middle mouse button to pan. My brain sometimes. Okay, I'm gonna click here, right on this back part here. I'm holding Shift and middle mouse button to pan. So what I'm going to do is press E and then right click. I'm then going to click the towards the upper left to get our manipulator. Then I'm just pulling this bone out like this. So you can see that there. So I clicked here, I pressed E to extrude, you couldn't see anything because I just extruded, and then I selected the manipulator and I pulled that bone out. I'm holding the middle mouse button to go back towards the front, holding control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom out. And then what we need to do is position these bones. So I'm moving these bones here. So I'm gonna go to view, viewport, point, front. And then what I'm doing is I'm dragging these bones. So these ones here, I'm gonna hold Shift Z, then press B for box select. Oh, left click on nothingness to deselect. I just want this right here, and I'm pulling this over here. So I'm going to left click to deselect. I'm going to hold Shift, press Z to come out of that that mode we had there. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button. Okay, that did grab the whole hand. You can press 1 to go back to your front view on your if you have a number keypad rather than going over there like I'm doing. Okay, so now I'm pulling this hand, the bones of the hand. I'm paying attention to the wrists particularly. And I'm just trying to line everything up here in the front view. We'll turn to the side view, then we'll have to adjust things again. But for the most part, this is coming along fairly well. See this right here, this being the elbow joint. We need to move that to there. So we'll just put that like there. Okay, I'm going to hold the mouse button to turn to the side. I'm going to go to View, Viewpoint, and then select right. What I'm going to do is left click here. I'm going to go to the select box. I'm going to hold Shift. I went to there mainly because I wanted to not have the manipulator get in the way. Now that I have what I want selected, I'm going to go back to the manipulator, which is called the Move tool. I'm just pushing this back around the ankle area. This right here, this thing right here is important because when you have a character walking, when I say this, what I'm talking about is like this angle here. When the character walks, the way that the things are set up with these bones are very important to having your character look whole as the character walks. So I'm going to click back there, Shift. Click back on the manipulator, bring this back more. This is too far forward. Same thing, this hip bone right here. We're just pulling this back. When you're rigging, see this bend here? You want to have a bend in your leg to help your inverse kinematics that we're going to set up later. This bend helps the inverse kinematics know how the leg is supposed to move. So you want to try to have some bend in this in the rig when you're working with your the leg part of your armature. When we look here, you can see the arm is way too far forward, so we'll hold the middle mouse button. We'll hold Control, hold the right mouse button, do a lasso select to select all of that. Now we'll go to View Point. You can also press 3 on your number keypad if you have it. Select right. And then we just pull this back into position. When I say back, the thing I'm looking at here is like right there, the top pretty much right there. And when I say there, I'm talking about the shoulder joint. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to go back towards the front. These bones here, need to click here. When you use the manipulator in this view here, you can be sure that you're moving your bones in a decent axis. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to press 3 on my number keypad. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Okay, we're going to click here. We need to push this so it isn't so far back. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan down. Remember, if you don't have a middle mouse button, you can use this hand. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. You can also use this to move in. So nice that that's in here now. Anyway, I'm going to click here, drag this back, click here. So when I say here, I'm working with the neck, in case you happen to be looking down. Clicking at this main bone that's in the head, we want to move this back, the bottom part of the bone. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan down. I'm going to push this down. So this bone right here, it tends to work well. I find have it, going from towards the front of the head towards the back of the neck as far as placement for that. Okay, this bone right here, we don't need this bone, so I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu. I'm then going to select dissolve bones. Okay, so we're going to click here. We're going to move this to here. So this right here, the bottom of this bone is basically how the head is going to pivot. So all of this mesh will be parented to this. And then when the head turns, it'll pivot right here. So this right here, we need to move this up. So this bone will be like our side to side movement as far as like the head moving from, side to side. This bone right here I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to press 1 to go to front view. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button. So these bones here are too high, so we'll click here, push this down like that. For this bone here, we'll click here, we'll push this down like that. I'm going to press 3 on my number keypad. I'll pull this back. This bone, I'll push this forward. Then I'll left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, for here, I'm going to hold them the mouse button. I turn the view just so I could have these bones away from these bones here, right? And I hold Control, hold the right mouse button to select all of these bones right here. I'm going to press 3 to go to the side view now, and I'm pushing this in. I'm paying attention more to this right here, getting that lined up with the wrist, at least from this angle. So now I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate, holding Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Okay, when you're working with a rig, typically you're going to be going, from front to side to make sure everything is in place. I'm going to press 1 on my number keypad. I'm going to hold Control, hold the right mouse button to draw a lasso select. When I said before paying attention, I'm paying attention to right here on the wrist. So I have all this selected, but my eyes are right on that wrist point, making sure that that is in place. So now I'm looking at this elbow joint. I'm also looking here. So see, the shoulder needs to be out more. So what we want to do is left click here as well as this point here. Pull this to the side like this. So I'm going to press 3 on my number keypad. So that looks decent from that. Also, go over more. When you're putting these bones in place, you want to think about the volume, like what moves. So all of this mesh, like if you ignore the bone right here, just look at the mesh here. This shoulder as well as like the bicep, tricep, all this will be connected for the most part to this bone right here. So in thinking that, I'm like, okay, I don't want this bone to have much control over that. So this looks pretty decent. When I say this, I mean how this bone is lined up with this arm, not the hand, but this part. This looks pretty decent from this angle. So I'm going to hold the middle mouse button, look from this angle. Looks decent from that angle. I'm going to press, just hold the middle mouse button. We can click here, move this up like this. So from the side here, I pushed this forward. We can move this. I clicked here just to move the manipulator out of the way of here, so I'm clicking back here now. You kind of want the bones to be in a place where they'll be in the best position to move the mass of your mesh. I'm holding the middle mouse button, taking a look, holding control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Looking here. When you're setting up these bones here, particularly like the ankle bone, you want to make sure you have enough length so that your foot can really like bend forward. So when it flexes, I find that helps a lot when your character walks. I'm going to press 3 on my number keypad. Let's go thinking about moving that bone back further. That bone should be fine for there. Holding shift as well as the middle mouse button. Okay. Okay, I am going to hover here, hold shift, press B to draw a zoom box over this hand. I let go of shift B, I zoomed in, that's what happened. When I set up the hands, typically what I do is I will click these fingers here. I'm going to right click, then I'm going to press the X button to bring up our delete menu. Then I'm going to select bones to delete those bones there. Okay, I am planning on bringing these bones back. You might say, well, why get rid of them if you are going to bring them back? And the reason why is I find it easier to set up this bone right here, make sure the bone axes are right for this, and then I just duplicate this to the other bones. Often I'm in projects where I have to model a mesh, and then I have to set up the rig for the mesh, set up the how the rig works, and then I have to texture the mesh, and then I'll have to animate the mesh. So that's a lot of work. So when you find little things to make things quicker, even like this, like the hands can be difficult. So this tends to make things easier by working on this bone and then duplicating across. A lot of times, the projects I'll do the modeling work is set up for me, the rigging as well as the animating. My wife often she will texture the models. Anyway, I'm gonna hover here. I'm gonna press L. So when I pressed L, I selected all of this line of bones right here. Okay, I'm gonna hold the mouse button to rotate the view, push this over to the general area. I'm gonna press R to rotate, so I'm just rotating by view, not using an axis. I'm gonna hold the mouse button to rotate. I'm gonna press R to rotate by view again. Just changing the view so I can see in a 3D way if this is actually going in place. I'll press C. Move this up. Okay, I'm going to click this bone. I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose bones to delete. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to press L to select all these bones. Move these like this. Move them up, forward. Press R to rotate like this. Press S to scale them up some. Press R to rotate like that. Click here. Okay. Okay, now we need to turn on our axes for our bones. We can see how they're rotated. So we're in the edit mode for the bones. This is important. I'm going to click on, looks like a little guy running. I'm going to left click there. Scroll down, see where it says viewport display. You're going to click this arrow right here. Scroll down, you see all these different options right here. You're going to select axes. And now we can see the axes, which shows us how the bones are rotated. Okay, this is actually a cool addition to Blender 2.8. Before, your axes of bones were, I believe, just black. Now they are colored to make it easier for you to see which axes your bones are on, as far as like how they're rolled. So that is that's nice. Okay, we have the axes showing, so we can make sure that our fingers bend correctly. The way that I tend to like things to be is I like them to be as far as axes, with the Z going down, the X going to the right, and then the Y coming forward. This pretty much is already that as well. For the thumb, we could have the thumb go down like this or go towards the hand. So we kind of want the Z to be facing how we want this to bend. So that's kind of set up. This colored thing is really nice in Blender 2.8. No, that's actually not bad. We can adjust this somewhat. So what we're going to do is left click here. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. So basically, where you see the Z at is where the fingers will bend down. So they'll bend towards the Z, right? So right now the thumb will bend that way. So what I want to do is rotate the Z so it's down more. So I can press N, and this is very hard to see on this screen, but this is roll, so you could adjust things there. I'm going to press N to take away that properties panel. Instead, I'm going to hold Control, press R, and Control R is a shortcut where we can change the roll. So see, the Z is going this way. So be aware that where the bottom of the bone is at is where the axis is at. So see right here. So when I rotate, I press Control R, this rotated, right? See how this Z is here? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go Control, hold down Control, press R. So I'm rotating the bone, right? So if I want these bones, so I rotated this, but I like how this axis is. If I want these bones to copy this rotation, I'm going to click here. Notice this Z here is going more that way. This one's going down like this. I'm going to hold shift, click here. And then this has the roll that I want, right? So I'm going to hold shift, click this one last. So now I'm going to hold Control. While holding Control, I'm going to hold Alt. So I'm holding Control as well as Alt. Now I'm going to press A. And what happened is these bones now have the roll of this right here. Though they did as far as movement, they changed their movement as well. But the roll is what I was mainly concerned about. By the way, see how my bones are solid here? Right now we're in what's called the look dev mode. So this is the mode that's second from the left, right? So depending on what view we have here, is how we see things, right? So if I click overlays here, if I want to make the bones transparent, you won't see a way to make them transparent. This wireframe here refers to the mesh geometry, not the bone. If I click shading here, you won't see anything as far as making the bones transparent. However, if I go to the solid mode here, right? Now when I click on shading, see this x-ray? So now when I click x-ray, now the bones are transparent in this particular mode. So I just wanted to let you know about this. So if I rotate the bones so that they're crossing over each other, see how I can see through the bones there? So yeah, just in case you want to know about that, that's how you would have your bones be transparent. I'm going to click here, take away the x-ray, then go back to the look dev mode. Okay, right now we're still placing our bones inside of our mesh, right? Suppose, I'm telling you, you can rotate on the z-axis. Suppose without doing anything, as far as constraints and things, which is the plan for us to do later on, you want to just see if these bones are going to rotate the right way. One thing that you can do is if I press, well, actually, I'm going to go to pose mode. And then with these bones set up like here, if I press C and then paint these bones, right? If I go to our pivot point, and I change our pivot point from Blender's default pivot point, which is the medium point. If I go to individual origins, if I press R to rotate on the x-axis, is that right? Maybe it's a Y. Wait a second. R to rotate on the X. There we go. So you want to press R to rotate on the x-axis twice. So this gives you a preview of how your bones are going to rotate. So I can do the same thing with the thumb. I'll left click on nothingness, make sure I'm deselected on or not selected on anything. I'll press C for paint select all these bones. Then I'm going to press R to rotate on the x-axis twice. And this lets you see how your bones are going to actually rotate. And if you notice they're rotating towards that z-axis. I'm going to right click and then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, as far as what I just showed you, remember I showed you that in pose mode. And I didn't just press R and then X. I pressed R and then X. I pressed X twice. So it's R and then X twice to see that thing I just showed you there. Okay, so after pressing R and then X twice. And by the way, if you're like, why am I emphasizing that? I'm emphasizing that because when I first started making tutorials, one of the reasons that I first started making them was I would see some decent tutorials. However, points that I thought were pretty big deals, people would often say what they did, but they wouldn't emphasize it. So they might say for a second, I would imagine I've done that as well in my tutorials. However, right here while I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to emphasize, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make tutorials, because when I would see tutorials, sometimes I get frustrated. I was like, if I made tutorials, I would make them like this. So long story short, R to rotate, X twice. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do is click to go back to edit mode. I'm going to left click to make sure I'm not selected on anything. Okay, with our basic roll set up, I'm getting the view so I can get like a top view of this. I'm going to hover here, press L, hold shift, press D, right click, pull this over, down, up. I need to go to my pivot point, change this back to the default pivot point, which is the medium point. Now I can press R to rotate. And I'll hold shift, press D, right click to duplicate. Shift D, right click. So these need some adjustment. However, I find that they need less adjustment than if you didn't, roll them first or adjust the roll on the one first. Left click to deselect. Okay, and when I said left click, I meant I left clicked on nothingness. So I'm going to hover here, press L. I'm getting this in a view where I can see like right here, there's like no finger there. So the finger's more towards the bottom. So I'll just move this up. For the most part, that finger's in there. I'm looking at this finger here. I'll left click on nothingness to deselect. Click here. Left click on nothingness to deselect. I'll hover here, press L. Forward some. Press R to rotate. Slightly. Move this up. Left click to deselect. So I left clicked on nothingness to deselect. Okay, so we are going to go to our pivot point, change this back to individual origins, test out to see how these hands bend. I'm going to click, go to pose mode. All right, well, see how these fingers bend. So I press C for paint select. I'm selecting all of the fingers. I'm going to press R and then X twice. And fingers look good how they are bending. I'm going to right click to get out of there. Just trying to get a different view. I'm going to press R, then X twice. Okay, the fingers look like they're bending correctly. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I am going to go to the upper left click, select edit mode, go to our pivot point options and change these options. Change the pivot point option from individual origins back to Blender's default pivot point, which is the medium point. So now we are selected on the medium point. Okay, I'm going to left click here. Just moving. The reason why I'm putting this bone like this is because this bone is going to control this main mass right here. So click this. That's kind of how you want to think when you're rigging. So now I'm just rotating, taking a look, seeing how the bones are placed. I'll left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Just taking a look at how our bone placement looks good to me. I'll hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Okay, we have our bones in place. What we need for now, I'm holding shift and as well as the middle mouse button to pan. We can look to our right, the button that looks like a little guy running. We can click the check mark next to axes to take away the axes so we don't see them anymore. Okay, what we're going to do now is click near the or click on the tools button. See where we see this x-axis mirror? We're going to click to take away that check mark next to x-axis mirror. Okay, there's a few things that you should know about rigging. One of them is you need to know which mode you're in. It's very important to know which mode you're working in, as far as what you need to do as far as working with your rig. You set up your bones as well as set up parenting in edit mode. You set up constraints as well as things like inverse kinematics in pose mode. All right, this is very important to know these different things. Other things you should know about is when you have an armature bone that doesn't have a force pushed on it, like the ground or leaning against something like an arm. Armature bones are that tend to be set up like that are better as far as having forward kinematics to work with. In general, a rig will be set up by default to work as far as forward kinematics. Inverse kinematics are when you work with things like a rig that has a force going against it, like a leg armature bone going against the force of the ground. We have things like that. Inverse kinematics are a better setup as far as your rigging and how your armature skeleton is set up to work. Okay, what we're about to do is we're going to move into pose mode to set up inverse kinematics. Another thing you should know about rigging is rigging can tend to get complicated depending on how much you want your rig to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on one side of the rig, and then what we're going to the plan is after we set up the controls for one side of the rig, then we'll basically copy, in a sense, those controls to the other side of the rig. Okay, there's different ways to set up your rigging. This is my particular way of setting up your rigging, or setting up rigging. So what you want to do is click on this right here. Essentially, we're going to use this for a handle to work with our inverse kinematics. So with this clicked on, we want to hold Alt, press P. This brings up our clear parent menu, and then we want to left click to select clear parent. Okay, so with this parent cleared, what we want to do is go to our upper left click, and then go to pose mode. Okay, with rigging, the order that you select bones is important. We have this bone selected first. We're going to hold shift, and then while holding shift, we're going to left click this bone. I'll let go of shift. Be aware that before Blender 2.8, so Blender 2.79, and before, as far as I know, to use the shortcut keys for setting up an inverse kinematic, you used to use Shift K. In Blender 2.8, we use Shift I. So I'm going to hold shift, and while holding shift, I'm going to press I. This brings up our add IK. I'm then going to select to active bone. And now we can see this bone here turn yellow, letting us know that we have inverse kinematics set up on that bone. Okay, so we have the handle here, right? Pretty much when you set up inverse kinematics, there's something called a chain length, and the chain length basically goes from the handle to here, right? When you have two bones, you want the chain length to be 2. So here's the handle, here's bone 1, here's bone 2. To set this up, what we want to do is hover over our buttons here, roll the mouse wheel so we can see this constraints button. So this is bone constraints. We left click here, and you'll see this chain length here. Now see it says 0. We want to change this to 2. So we're going to left click once and then left click a second time. So now we have this set to chain length 2. Okay, so with that set to chain link 2, now when we click this bone, I left click there, now press G, we can see that our leg is moving like it should. And when I say like it should, I mean in the sense that it's moving from basically being connected at the hip, right? However, if you look at near the ankle, that isn't right. See how the bone is like flopping around that area? I'm going to right click to get that bone to jump back to its original position. So to fix that, remember, we set up inverse kinematics in pose mode. That's what we just did. We set up parenting in edit mode. So we need to set up parenting to fix that. So what we're going to do is go to our upper left, left click, go back to edit mode. And here in edit mode, we're going to set up parenting for this. So I'm going to hold shift. Oh, that's cap lock, hold shift. There we go. Hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. First, you want to click the bone you want to parent to the other bone. So this is going to be the child, that's going to be the parent. So we have this clicked first. With this click first, I'm going to hold shift. Now I'm going to click here second, right? I let go of shift, I hold control, press P. This brings up our make parent menu. And then what I want to do is select keep offset. I'm going to left click now to deselect. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back, hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to go to the upper left, left click, and then go to pose mode. I'm going to click on the handle, and then I'm going to press G. And if you notice, you can see around the ankle area, there's, you know, the bones aren't like, the bones are moving like they should. If we click here, and this is a big thing with forward kinematics, when we click on this bone here and then push down, you see how the foot stays in place. And this is very important because, you know, your character is gonna, when it walks, the character is gonna have to bend down. So that is that looks correct how that is now. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna press 1 on the number keypad. We're currently in pose mode. I'm gonna left click, go to edit mode. So here in edit mode, what we're going to do is I'm going to hold shift, press Z. This made us go to X-ray mode. I'm going to hold control, hold the right mouse button, and this allows me to draw a lasso select around this leg right here. So with that leg selected, I'm going to press the X key. This brings up our delete menu. I'm then going to select bones to delete those bones in that you know, that we just had selected there. Okay, I'm going to hold shift, press Z to come back to solid mode. I'm going to press 3 on my number keypad. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan up. The reason why we're doing this is we're going to start working on our ankle rig. This is extremely important as far as having your character walk. You can work with a rig without having this setup. However, I would recommend that you learn how to do this and apply this to your rigs, as I find that it makes a humongous difference in how your character walks, how your character looks as they walk. Okay, to set up this ankle rig, what we want to do is hold shift and then see this ball right here. We want to right click to put the 3D cursor right here. I just let go of shift. Where the 3D cursor in Blender is at is important because where the 3D cursor is at in Blender is where objects tend to come into Blender at. So with the 3D cursor here, I'm going to hold shift, press A, and we just brought in an armature bone. Now when we brought in this armature bone, the head of the armature bone is selected and our 3D cursor has the root of the armature bone. That's important because what we want to do is snap this head to this root. The way we're going to do that is hold shift, press S. That brought up our snap to menu. So what we want to do is choose selection to cursor keep offset. So I'm going to left click to do that. That made it look like our armature bone disappeared. It didn't. We're going to take this move tool and then push forward. And then what I'm going to do is left click here, then bring that back some like that. Okay, so this bone here is rolled. What we want to do is hold Alt, press R, and what that did was that cleared the roll of the bone. So I held Alt and I pressed R to clear that the roll that was on the bone. Okay, what we want to do is push this bone down. We want to have this back part of the bone be pretty much matched up with this. So we're going to push this forward like this. Then we want this part of the bone to be matched up here. So we're going to push that forward like that. Then we're going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to click on this bone again. I'm going to move this up somewhat like that. I'm actually going to click here and move this up. Click and move this up some like that. Now we're currently in the side view. I'm going to press the 1 on my number keypad to go to our front view, and we can see that this is off center. So we're going to push this bone so it is aligned up with our other bone. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is press I'm going to press 3 on my number keyboard to go to a right orthographic view. Remember, you can go to view, viewpoint, and then you could also have gone here to go to the right view as well. Okay, what we want to do is to parent some bones here. So the order is important. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to left click here, hold shift, and then second click this bone. So with the bones clicked in that order, we're going to hold control, press P. This makes our make parent menu pop up. We're then going to select keep offset. I'm now going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to first select this bone, hold shift, then second select this bone. Let go of shift, hold control, press P. This brings up our make parent menu. I'm then going to select keep offset. Okay, what we want to do now is left click on nothingness to deselect. We're going to go to our upper left. We're going to left click and then go to pose mode. Here in pose mode, we're going to click on this bone right here. We're going to hold shift, and then while holding shift, we're going to click this bone. I'm going to let go of shift, and now what I'm going to do is hold down shift, control, and then press C. This brings up our add constraints with target menu. We're going to then select copy location. Once we selected copy location, this bone jumped up here. We want to look to our menu to the right. We're going to left click there. We're going to look to where we see head, tail. There's a slider here, and you're going to left click and drag this slider over until this says 1. Okay, what I want to do now, or what we want to do, is I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. We're going to go back to edit mode. Going back to edit mode so we can duplicate 2 bones. So we're going to left click here, hold shift, and then while holding shift, we're going to left click here. We just held shift so we could select both of those bones. We're then going to hold shift, press D, and then right click. I didn't click anything else. I'm moving my mouse just so you can see that there's 2 duplicated bones. I'm going to right click, and now those duplicated bones move right back to their original position. Okay, what we want to do is rename these bones. So you want to look to your right. This is your outliner window here. See where we see meta rig. This is your armor, your skeleton. We're going to click the triangle there, and we can see this other meta rig here. We're going to click the triangle there. Then we're going to click where we see bones, right? Our bone. So this is for the spine. Here's for the thigh. We're going to click the triangle there. Okay, here we go. So here are the new bones. So this bone right here, hopefully you can see that it says foot.L.001. This foot.L is the original bone. We want this bone right here, which is the duplicated bone. We know this is the duplicated bone of this because of that 001 right there, or .001. So what we're going to do is we're going to left click here, or double click there. We're going to name this foot underscore roll dot L, then press enter. So now we just renamed that bone. Okay, now what we want to do is name the other bone that's connected to this one. So when we look at this foot underscore roll dot L, see this triangle, we're going to click here. Here's that bone. We're going to double click there. We're going to name this toe underscore control dot L, and then press enter to lock that in. Okay, just so you're not controlled, those bones are there, the bones that we're renaming. They're just in this orthographic view, they're right in line with each other, so you can't see them. That's why we're naming them from here. Okay, what we want to do now is we want to select this foot underscore roll dot L bone. So I'm going to left click on that. And then what I'm going to do is go to the upper left. I'm going to left click to go to pose mode. Here in pose mode, I'm going to press R to rotate this. I pressed R to rotate this just so we can easily see, which bone this is compared to that bone. And the reason why we're doing this is if we go back to edit mode, you can see the bones are right on top of each other again. So when we come to pose mode, we can select the bone that we want to select and know that we have the bone that we actually want to select. Okay, what we're going to do now is go to our upper left. We're going to go back to pose mode, and we can see back in pose mode, we're still selected on this bone. With this bone selected on, we want to go to our right, click on our bone constraint, and we want the copy location constraint on this bone, but not on this bone here. When I say this bone, just to be clear, this is our foot underscore roll dot L bone. So what we're going to do with that bone selected is just click this X to take off the copy location constraint off of that bone. Okay, what we want to do now is left click on nothingness to deselect. We're going to left click here, and we can look in this upper left hand corner and see that we're selected on our toe underscore control dot L bone. With this selected and with us knowing that this is selected, we're going to go to our upper left click, then go to edit mode. This bone that we're currently selected on, we know is the correct bone, even though it's in line with the other bone. So with that bone selected, we're going to hold shift, then left click on this bone. I let go of shift. The order is important. With the bone selected in that order, I'm going to hold control, press P. This brings up our make parent menu. I'm then going to select keep offset. Okay, what we're going to do now is left click on nothingness to deselect. So we're going to go to our upper left click, go to pose mode. We're going to select this bone, which is our foot underscore roll dot L bone. With that bone selected and with us knowing that that bone is selected, we're going to left click, then select edit mode. And then with that bone selected and being here in edit mode, we're going to press R to rotate 180, then press enter to lock that in. Okay, I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to left click here, hold shift, and then left click on our foot underscore roll dot L bone second. The order is important. I'm going to hold control, press P, and our make parent menu pops up. Previously, we chose keep offset. Normally, when we had our make parent menu pop up, this time we're going to select connected. Okay, what we're going to do is left click on nothingness to deselect. We're then going to go to our upper left click, and then select pose mode. First, we want to select our toe underscore control dot L, then hold shift, and then second, we selected toe dot L. With those bones selected in that order, what we want to do is hold Shift, press I. This brings up our Add IK menu. We're then going to left click to select to active bone. The bones jump. We go to our bone constraints to the right. We click there. We look for chain link. We take this to 1. And then when we see use tail, we click this check mark to take away that use tail there. With the bones still selected, we hold Shift as well as Control and then press C. This brings up our Add Constraints with Targets menu. And then what we want to do is select Copy Rotation. So then I'm going to left click to deselect. So I left clicked on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is press A to select everything. We're going to hold Alt. While holding Alt, we're going to press R. Still holding Alt, I'm going to press G. And what that did was that reset our rotation as well as reset our location. So our bones are in the original places they were. They're in a good position. This is how we want them to be. So I'm going to left click on nothingness now to deselect. Okay, so we're going to left click here. We're going to press G. And we can see when we press G, our leg moves up. I'm going to right click to get that bone to jump back in place. I'm going to press R. And we can see that our leg will go forward as well as back. I'm going to right click to get that bone to jump back into place. I'm going to left click here, then press R. And we can see that here our leg is moving forward like it should. So I'm going to right click to get that to jump back into place. And I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, what we want to do is go to our upper left. We're going to select edit mode. We're going to select this bone right here. I'm going to scroll up so that this is the bone. We're going to double click here. We're going to name this foot underscore handle.L and then press enter to lock that in. I'm then going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, it's very important in Blender to have your bones named, particularly with them having a .L or .R on the bone. Typically, when you're doing things like walk cycles, you can animate things very quickly by reversing poses. So you'll copy a pose, reverse the pose, and it allows you to animate things a lot more quickly. However, you need to have those .Ls as well as .R. So, long story short, it's important as far as naming your bones, as far as having your animations actually be easier to work with, as well as to get through animating the different animations you're trying to make. Okay, what we want to do now is add a pull target to this armature. So what we're going to do is left click right on the knee joint there. I'm going to hold Shift, press S, and then I'm going to choose cursor to selected. Okay, we moved the 3D cursor here. The reason why we did that is because in Blender, where your 3D cursor is at is where objects tend to come into Blender at. I'm going to press 1 on the my number keypad to go to front view. You could also go to view, viewpoint, and then front to do the same thing. With us in this view here, I'm going to hold Shift, press A. We brought an armature bone in right there. I'm going to left click on that armature bone, press 3 on my number keypad, and then I'm going to push this armature bone out to about here. Imagine the leg coming up like where the knee would go, and you want this to be a little further than that as far as the distance from the knee. Okay, if you don't know what a pull target is, imagine the leg moving around. Often you want to have the knee pointing in a certain direction. A pull target gives you additional control, which helps you position the angle of your knee. So that's basically what a pull target is. Okay, with this bone selected, we want to name this. So here's the bone here. We're going to double click. We're going to name this pt.l. short for pull target. Left, I'm going to press enter to lock that in. Okay, now we need to set this pole target up. To do that, what we need to do is go to our upper left click, and then go to pose mode. Here in pose mode, we want to left click on our armature bone that has the IK constraint on it. We are in our constraints settings right here. See where it says pole target here? So what we can do is click to take this eyedropper and then just select on pole target. And now that is not quite set up. Okay, so now we need to look where we see bone, and we're going to put in PT, and then we can see Blender's like, oh, there's PT. So we'll left click there. As soon as we did that, the pole target is interacting with the IK. Typically, when you do this, the angle of your IK jumps. So what you want to do is left click where you see pole target angle, or pole angle is what it says. I'm going to left click here and then enter in -90, then press enter. And then this makes your IK be set up to work correctly with your pole target. Okay, so I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. And I'm going to click here, press G. So our leg is still moving correctly. And see how our knee is like bent there, right? Watch this. So we can control the angle of that knee. And that's what the pole target does. So what I'm going to do is select A to press A to select everything. Hold Alt while pressing R. I'm still holding Alt. Now I'm going to press G. So now things are set up again. So I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect everything. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. When I click here and then press G, when we move our leg doesn't, our pole target doesn't move with our leg. We want to fix that. It's pretty easy to fix. The way we're going to fix that is we're going to left click on nothingness to deselect. We're then going to go to our upper left hand corner, go to edit mode. We're going to click on our pole target, hold shift, and then while holding shift, click this bone right here. We're then going to hold control. While holding control, press P. This brings up our make parent menu. We're then going to select keep offset. I'm then going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, now with that set up, when I go to the upper left and then I select pose mode, so now I click the handle here and I press J, you can see that our pole target is moving along with our leg. That's what we want. I'm going to right click to get those armature bones to jump back to the original position. Then I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We need to copy these bones to the other side. We're going to go to our upper left, select edit mode. I'm going to press 1 to go to a front view. I pressed 1 on the number keypad. I'm holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold shift, press Z to go to our x-ray mode. I'm going to hold control, hold the right mouse button down, and then select all of these armature bones right here. With those armature bones selected, I'm going to hold shift, press Z to go back to solid mode. I'm going to go to our upper left click on armature, then come down to symmetricize. I'm then going to left click. And now we have these bones as well as the constraints copied to the other side. I'm then going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we want to do is go to our upper left, go to pose mode. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom out. I'm going to go to our box select so we don't see our move manipulator tool. Okay, so let's test this out to make sure it works. We'll click here, press G. That looks correct. We'll click here, press G. That looks correct. We'll click here, press R to rotate on the X-axis. Looks correct. I'll right click to get that to jump back to its original position. I'm going to left click here, press R to rotate on the X-axis. That also looks correct. I'm going to right click to get that to jump back to its original position. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to left click here, press R to rotate on the X axis. Looks correct. I'll left click here, press R to rotate on the X axis. Looks correct. I'll left click on this pole target, press G. Looks correct. I'll right click to get that to jump back to its original position. I'll left click here. I'll press G. That looks correct as well. I'm going to right click to get that to jump back to its original position. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we want to do now is go to our upper left-hand corner and then go to edit mode. I'm going to press 1 on my number keypad to go to front view. Actually, let me hold them in the mouse, but let me select here first. Select the bottom bone, hold shift, then select this other bone while holding shift. I'll let go of shift. I'm going to press 1 to go to our front view on the number keypad. I'm now going to hold shift, press S. This brings up our snap to menu. I'm then going to select cursor to selected. Because I had these two bones selected, Blender chose the center point between them, which is what we want. Now I'm going to hold shift and then press A to bring in new bone. And then with this bone in, we have the head of the bone currently selected. I'm going to hold shift, press S. Hold shift, press S, there we go. And then I'm going to choose selector to cursor offset. So the bone looks like it disappeared. It didn't. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. Then I'm going to push this bone forward like that. Okay, I'm going to click on our select box. I'm now going to click on our move tool. I'm going to bring this bone back some like that, and then going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Actually, let me reselect the bone. We need to name this. So here's the bone here. We'll name this main. Capital R. We'll name it main root. Doesn't need a .L or .R because it's in the center. So now I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, remember when rigging, you set up constraints in pose mode, you set up parenting in edit mode. We're currently in edit mode, so I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button. We need to set up some parenting. So we're going to left click on this bone right here, hold shift. While holding shift, click here. And then while holding shift, click this bone here. Still holding shift. Lastly, I'm going to click this bone here. Now I'm going to let go of shift. So what I'm going to do now is hold control, press P. This brings up our make parent menu. And then I'm going to select keep offset. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. The reason why we did that was now we can go to pose mode. And then when we click on this main bone, we can press G. And we can move our entire armature. So then I'm going to right click to get that to jump into place. Then I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is go to our upper left. We're going to left click on edit mode. We're going to click this bone right here. I'm going to hold shift, press D. There's a duplicate bone here now. I'm going to right click. So I have that bone selected. I'm going to name this root underscore handle, then press enter. Okay, so with this new bone made, what we want to do now is press R to rotate on the X axis 1, 8, 0, and then press enter to lock that in. Okay, I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hover here, hold shift, press B to draw a zoom box to zoom in. First, we're going to select on our original bone, which is named spine. We're now going to hold shift and then select the new bone that we made, which is called root underscore handle. And then with those bones selected in that order, we're going to hold Control, press P. This brings up our Make Parent menu. Then we're going to select Keep Offset. Then I'm going to left click on Nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we want to do now is hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. We want to click on this bone menu here. We're going to scroll down. We're going to click this bone right here. And then what we want to do is look where we see relations. We're going to click this triangle here. See where we see this inherit rotation? We want to left click and take away that check mark next to inherit rotation. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to left click on Nothingness to deselect. I'm going to go to the upper left hand corner, go to pose mode. I'm going to click on this top bone, hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm then going to press R to rotate on the Y axis. And now you can see our character is able to have some hip movement. I'm then going to left click on Nothingness to deselect. I'm then going to go to the upper left hand corner and then select edit mode. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, pop, 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 pop. Okay, what we want to do now is turn our attention to the hands. I'm going to hover here, hold shift while holding shift, press B. Then I'm going to draw a zoom box to zoom in here. Okay, as far as rigging the hands, we want all of the fingers to be able to bend, right? A lot of times when you're animating, you'll go from having an open hand like this to having a fist. So what we want to do is have one bone that we can control that one bone, and that one bone will allow us to control all of our fingers at once. So that's what we're setting up here. Okay, so where are we going to get that one bone from? What we're going to do is we're going to take this bone here, hold shift, press D, then right click. We're going to then move this bone up. Holding the middle mouse button, rotate. I'm just moving this to have it more in a line with, more towards the middle of the hand. So I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, let's actually name this bones. I'm going to click here. We have the outliner here, which we can name bones. We can also go to right here, scroll up. Then we have the bone right here. So we can name this as well here. So I'm going to name this main underscore finger underscore control dot L. Then press enter to lock that in. Okay, the dot L in there is important because for animating later on, to be able to reverse poses when you go to animate, you'll see, particularly like I had mentioned previously, things like walk cycles makes it a lot easier, it being animation itself, if you can reverse poses. So what we're going to do, I'm going to left click on Nothingness to deselect. We add bones in edit mode. It's important when you're dealing with rigging to realize which each mode does. That's why I'm repeating this to you again. We add bones. We set up parenting in edit mode. We position bones in edit mode as far as positioning them to be set up to be attached to a mesh later on. As far as adding constraints, we do that in pose mode. So we need to add constraints to this. So we are going to go to our upper left and then left click on pose mode. Okay, as far as rigging these fingers, Blender actually makes this fairly easy. First, you want to click the bone that's going to control the other bones. Then you want to hold shift and then click the bone that's going to be controlled. With the bones selected in that order, what we're going to do is hold shift, control, then press C. This brings up our add constraints with targets menu. We're then going to go to copy rotation. Our bone jumps there. We then look to our right, select bone constraints as far as the button. See this world space as well as world space. We're going to left click here and change this to local space as well as local space. Okay, now with that done, what we're going to do is left click on nothingness to deselect. We're going to press C to paint select. We're going to select all of these bones except for that one. We're going to right click to get out of paint select. After all of the bones are selected, now we're going to hold shift and then click this bone, right? This is the bone that has the copy rotation constraint on it. Now we're going to go to our upper left. We're going to left click on pose. We're going to look to where we see constraints. Then we're going to select copy constraints to selected bones. Okay, now with that done, we're going to click on this control bone here. We're going to press R to rotate on the Y axis. And you can see we have control over all of our fingers at the same time just by rotating this one bone. So I'm going to right click to get that bone to jump back to its original position. Okay, one thing you should be aware of with a hand rig setup like this is, suppose you want all of your fingers to bend except your pointing finger. What you could do is you could select your finger, go to this influence. See how the influence is all the way up to 1? That influence basically reflects how much this bone controls this copy rotation constraint. So if, for instance, I'll show you, I'll take this down. I'll click here. There's probably a way or a shortcut to select multiple bones and take down the influence all at once. I'm not sure how to do that. But see how all the influence is down? So now when I press R to rotate on the Y axis, all of the bones bend except for that one pointing finger. So be aware that you can do that. So now I'm just going to take these back up. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to press 1 to go to front view. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to go to the upper left, go to edit mode. I'm going to hold shift, press Z, move my mouse here, hold control while holding control, holding the right mouse button to draw a lasso select around these bones here. I'm then going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose bones to delete. I'm then going to hover the mouse here, hold control, hold the right mouse button to draw a lasso, select around all of these bones right here. I'm then going to go to armature, then go down to symmetricize, and then I am going to select. So now I'm going to left click to deselect, hold shift, then press Z to come out of X-ray mode. Okay, so now we're going to go to our upper left, go to pose mode, we'll click here, press R to rotate on the Y axis. Looks like they're bending correctly. We'll click here, R to rotate on the Y axis. They look like they're bending correctly. I'm going to right click to deselect, then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, we're done setting up the basics for our rigging. What we want to do now is look to bones like this that just control other bones and make sure that these bones are set up so that they don't affect our mesh when we go to attach the mesh to our armature bones. Okay, so what we're going to do is go through our bones that are just control bones. Click on them. We're in pose mode. That's important. We're going to click on this bone menu here. We're going to scroll down till we see the form. And we're going to take away that check mark next to the form. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to turn to the side. Roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to left click here. I'm just unclicking on the form. This bone here is a control bone to control the other bones. So we're going to Do the same thing for that. These here, same thing. We're just taking away that check mark next to the form. These bones here as well. Okay, I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan down. I'm going to hold control as well as middle mouse button to zoom out. What we're going to do now is we are going to go to our upper left click, select object mode. I am going to first click on our mesh, hold shift, then second click on our armature, let go of shift. I'm then going to hold control, press P. This brings up our set parent to menu. I'm then going to go down to where we see with automatic weights, and then I'm going to select with automatic weights. Typically, I find that automatic weights does a very good job, particularly for the legs. It tends to do a good job for the hands. It tends to need help when it comes to the shoulders, as well as the area around the head. Okay, I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. We're going to click on our armature bones. We're then going to go to our upper left, go to pose mode, see how this worked out. So we'll click for our leg here. We'll press G. Looks good. Press G on the other leg. Looks good. We'll click on our hip bone. I'm going to press R to rotate on the Y axis. Looks good. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button. Now just the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to click on the hand. I'm going to press R to rotate on the Y axis. Looks good. I'm going to left click right here. Press R twice. That looks good. I'll click here on the right on the chest bone. I'll press R to rotate on the X axis. Looks good. You can see our other pieces, mesh pieces being left behind. We'll deal with that. So let me show you how to deal with that. When I say with that, I mean these other pieces that need to be connected to this head bone. Okay, we're going to go to our upper, well, let's left click on nothingness to deselect. We're going to go to our upper left-hand corner. We're going to select object mode. So what we're going to do is roll the mouse wheel to zoom in, hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan down, roll the mouse wheel to zoom in. Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to left click on these eyebrows, hold shift, left click on the eyes, still holding shift, left click on the teeth. I'm holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm holding, I let go of shift. I'm holding control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm doing this just so I can grab these bottom teeth. Holding shift again. Now I have them. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. So we have all of the pieces of the mesh first, right? Now one of the issues is we hold shift, or it would seem like an issue. We hold shift. Then while holding shift, we click on our armature bones, right? Then we only want these pieces connected to this bone. Notice the entire armature is selected, right? So how do we deal with that? What we do is we just simply go to our upper left. We go to pose mode. And then here in pose mode, I'm going to hold shift again. And then we're just going to left click on this bone with that bone selected. And in that order, so first these mesh pieces were selected first, then the selected second, because the order is important. Now we hold control, press P. This brings up our set parent to menu. And for this, we want to go to where we see bone and then select bone. Okay, I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect, go to our upper left, click on object mode. Left click on nothingness to deselect, hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back, hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view, hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan, Control, as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. Okay, we're going to click on our armature bones. We're going to go to our upper left. We're then going to click on pose mode. We're going to click on this chest bone like we did before. I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate. We're going to press R to rotate on the X-axis, and now you can see that our eyebrows, our eyeballs, as well as our teeth move right along with our mesh. I'm going to right click to deselect and then left click on nothingness to deselect everything. Okay, so let's see how the head goes. So we're going to press R to rotate on the X-axis. See how the head is stretching there, and that is typical. I'll right click to get that to jump right back in place. I'm going to hold shift, roll the mouse wheel so you can see this better. I'm going to press R to rotate on the X-axis. See how the head is stretching, and that's typical. That what happens. And if you look at the head bone compared to the chin, we want this bone to control all of this right here. I'll hold the middle mouse button so you can see. So that's a lot of area for you to control. So that's most likely why that happens. Okay, I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm then going to go to the upper left. I'm then going to go to object mode. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate, hold Control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back, then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, we can fix the issues with the head, or the issue with the head, by weight painting. I learned how to do this from the YouTube channel Novice Animations. Just want to give credit where credit's due. He's the first channel that I saw showing step-by-step how to do weight painting inside of Blender. So if you want to find out more about this weight painting, I recommend you go check out Novice Animations YouTube channel. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is left-click on your armature. You want to hold shift, and then while holding shift, click on your mesh. The order is important. You let go of shift, then you're going to go to the upper left, and you're going to left click and then go to weight paint. So here in weight paint, I'm going to zoom back right here. Currently this weight is showing for this bone right here. However, if we hold shift, which I'm doing now, and then left click on a bone, now I'm letting go of shift, the attention of the weight painting mode goes to the bone that you shift and then left clicked on. Okay, I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom in. The way that weight painting works, blue basically represents no weight, red represents extreme weight, and then green represents in between. So when I say weight, basically what I mean is it's almost like how closely this mesh will follow the bone. So with blue, it's not following it at all. With green, it's following it half and half. With red, the mesh is following the bone to the extreme. Okay, there's a couple of things we can do to help ourselves out visually as far as weight painting. We're going to look to the upper right, go to overlays, go down to where we see 0 weights. We're currently set for none. We're going to set this to active, and this just lets us see where this bone isn't having any effect. We're then going to go to our upper left. We're going to go to object mode, left click on nothingness, click on our armature bones, go to what looks like a square, scroll down to where you see display as textured. We're going to click here and then select wire. Now these bones look transparent. Now we're going to left click on the bones, hold shift, and then while holding shift, left click on our mesh, go to our upper left, left click, and then go to weight paint mode. So basically now our bones are transparent. Okay, when you look at the head, you can see that the red is really near the top. The red means the bone, how closely the mesh will follow the bone. And you can kind of see where our issues are coming from. Your head is mainly skull with some flesh on it, so it's basically a hard surface object. So we want most of this to be red, except where the neck is right there. So I am painting red. The way that weight painting works is this circle is basically like this brush. This weight right here paints 100%, which basically means that I'm painting the maximum for this mesh to stay with this bone right here. If I turn this to 0, I would probably be painting either blue, or I guess I would be painting blue, which would mean that I'm painting nothing. I'm saying for the mesh, don't stay with this bone. Whatever part is blue, don't go with this bone at all. So you want to rotate, because when you work in 3D, generally it's a good idea to rotate. That looks good. Well, there's not so much here. We should be able to, no, maybe not. I thought if we held shift, we would do the opposite. So like, see right here how this is red? I don't want that, right? I can click here, change this to 0.5, right? I don't want that red there, right? So now, see that? So I just left clicked and now we have that. Actually, I don't want the head pulling here. I guess somewhat. I'm going to turn this to 0.2. What do I do? Press 0.2 and enter. There we go. So what we can do now is go from here to object mode. We'll click on the armature. We'll go to pose mode. So now we'll press R to rotate on the X axis, and look at that. See the chin, how the chin is still moving. Now, most of the time when you have that, it's not the chin. Most of the time it's this is pulling on the head. So I'm going to click, go here, click. I'm going to click the armature, hold shift. So first you select the armature, then you hold shift, then you select the mesh, let go, then you go to weight paint mode. So now what I want to do is hold shift, right? I'm holding shift and I'm clicking on this bone. So now this lets me see, so I'm letting go of shift. So when I hold shift, I select this bone. Now I don't want that. I don't want the top bone as well. I just want this bone. Oh, so if I hold shift and I click this, I can deselect there. Wait a second. Is that right? Okay, there we go. So now this is right. So now I held shift and I click here. See, we don't see all this influence here. We don't want that. So for this bone, what we want to do is take this all the way down to 0, and then these pieces of the face, I am painting this blue because I don't want influence on these parts. So it's the opposite. I want influence on the neck, but I do not want influence on the face. Okay, so we're going to click, go to object mode, click on the armature, and then go back to pose mode. Click on the head now, press R to rotate. We missed the spot. Wherever we missed that spot, see that right there? No. One thing you can do is, like, if you push the head down hard like this, what we'll do is left click on nothingness. We'll go to object mode, click here, here being the armature, hold shift, click there, there being the mesh. We'll go to weight paint, and then we'll hold shift. What's going on here? Okay, we'll hold shift here. So this leads me to believe that it must be this right here. Yep. So when I paint here, I'm going to hold shift Z and paint. See that piece? I'm going to hold shift press Z. That piece went away because that piece of the mouth, I'm going to hold shift Z again. This stuff right here, oh, wait a second, daggone it. Hold shift. There we go. This was affecting other pieces of the mesh. So that's kind of Alt A. Okay, we can do Alt A to deselect. So I'm going to take this back up. So that's something you can do is position your bones and then weight paint to see if you see a change. So I'm going to left click and then I'm going to go to object mode. Then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, now I am going to click on the armature. Then I'm going to left click and then go to pose mode. Okay, now I'm going to click on this bone, press R to rotate on the X axis. Get a better view. And for the most part, it looks better. Let's see it from the side here. Yeah, right click to get out of that. Something else you can do, by the way, is I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to go to the upper left click, go to object mode. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, the reason why we came to object mode is to click on our mesh to go to our, it looks like a wrench, to our modifier tools, and you'll see that there's a modifier for armature here. I'm going to click to turn these buttons on. Then there's this button here that says preserve volume. I'm going to left click to put a check right there. And what that does is that tries to keep pieces of mesh not from bunching up around armature bones. Okay, so I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click on the armature bone. I'm going to go to the upper left. I'm going to go to pose mode. Let's press R to rotate on the X axis. There's still a little pull in the neck, but I'm decent with that. So click here. Press G. Oh, look at that. You know what that is? That's from the... that's interesting. So what we'll do with that is, that being the eyebrow, we'll click on eyebrow, we'll go to the modifier, we'll click apply. We'll click on the eye, we'll go to our modifier, we'll click apply. Okay, with that done, we'll left click on our armature, we'll go to our upper left, we'll then select pose mode, roll the mouse wheel to zoom back, hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan, click here, press G. There we go. I'll right click to get that bone to jump back to its original position. Then I'll left click on nothingness to deselect. So typically when you weight paint, the legs would do good. Matter of fact, we didn't test out this here, and this is important. Click here, press R to rotate on the X axis. Wait a second. R to rotate on the X axis. There we go. That looks good. Looks like it's deforming well. You can select a bone, you can click overlay, and you'll still have control. So RX, you can see that. Looks like it's flexing well. I'll right click to get that to jump back to its original position. Left click on nothingness to deselect. Then go to the upper right and then left click on overlay so we can see our bones again. Typically there's issues with the shoulders. I'm going to hold shift, so let's see how this panned out. So click here, R to rotate on the Y axis. Or rotate on the x-axis. Yeah, there's a little, well, too much pull right there. See that? So we'll deal with that. I'll left click on nothingness to deselect. I'll left click, go to object mode, left click on nothingness, click on the armature, hold shift. First, the armature was selected. I'm holding shift. Now I'm selecting the mesh. So with the armature selected first, the mesh being selected second. Now we go to our upper left, and then we select weight paint mode. Now we hold shift, and while holding shift, click on the bone that we want to work with. Let go of shift. See this area right here? I have a weight of 1. That means I would paint red if I paint it right here. I don't want that. What I want to do is to take this down to 0. So now I am painting blue because I'm taking away the influence here. Pretty much when you're weight painting, you'll make the change and then you'll go to object mode, left click on nothingness to deselect, click on the armature, go to the upper left, click on pose mode, and then you'll see what happens. So I'll press R to rotate on the Y axis and say this right here. So I'm going to raise the arm up, right? This right here isn't so much. This right here is moving. That's so we're gonna left click on nothingness to deselect, go back to object mode. This is already selected. We'll hold shift, we'll click here. Since things were selected in that order, the armature first and the mesh, we can go here, then go to weight paint. Make sure we're on 0, and we can, and you can even see it changing there. As a matter of fact, let's see. We can click show wire. Not sure. See what this does. Oh, look at that. That's interesting. There. Also, what we can do is hold shift, press Z, and paint this in X-ray mode. Hold shift, press Z to come back. So now we'll go to object mode, left click on nothingness to deselect. We can already see that this is better. We'll click here, go to our upper left, click on pose mode, click here, press R to rotate on the Y axis. And now this is better. Still can be worked on, but that's better. So this, yeah, this went to the pose we had in before. We can hold Alt, press R, and then that'll come back to its original position. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Click here again, press G. And you can make tweaks. It looks like he is that neck. Wait a second. Or to rotate on the x-axis. Let's see if we can get a little more in that neck. So I'm going to left click, object mode, hold shift, go to weight paint mode, hold shift, click here. I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to hold Alt A, there we go. Hold shift, click here. That weight's 0. Let's see what this is doing here. So I'm going to hold Alt A, hold shift, click here. That's interesting. Okay. Go to object mode, left click on nothingness, click on our armature bone, go to the upper left, click pose mode. Let's press R to rotate on the x-axis. Left click on nothingness, go to object mode, hold shift, click here. Here being the mesh, go to weight paint mode. Yeah, see that right there? That's probably what's doing it. That being that green line right there. So we'll give some space there. Let's roll the mouse wheel back. Hold Alt, press A. Go to our upper left, go to object mode. Left click on nothingness to deselect. Click on our armature bone. Go to the upper left. Go to pose mode. Click on our head bone. Press R to rotate on the x-axis. The face looks better. Okay, yeah, looks better. You can. Sometimes I have to tell myself I'm doing a tutorial. There's a lot to weight painting. Don't be afraid of it. It's not, it's workable. The more you do it, the more you get used to it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to say this is weight painted. Now what we can do is there's certain bones that we don't need. So we can take those bones and move them out of the way. So you want to be in pose mode to do this, right? So this bone here controls the hips, right? So we're going to left click here. These leg bones are controlled by our inverse kinematics, which this is the handle now. So what we can do is hold shift, click these bones here, these handles, we're not using them. These green handles, we're not using them. Holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. So I'm letting go of shift. So I have all these bones selected, right? Looks like a little running guy. If I left click here, these are bone layers here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these bones to this layer here. Second layer from the left on the bottom. So I'm going to press M and then I'm going to click here. So now you don't see those bones. However, if I wanted to have those bones back, I can hold shift, and now those bones are right back. Okay, with those bones out of the way, we can just, it's a little easier to work with the bones that we need. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Okay, there is a lot more that can be done to make the rig work differently. The way I showed you here, you should be able to animate with this rig. You should be able to get what you want out of your mesh using this rig. Or what I mean by that is using a rig that you built using this technique. Okay guys, that's it for the tutorial. For all of those of you out there who like the videos on this channel, reshare them. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And for those of you who are new to this channel, if you like the videos on this channel, you would like to see more, please subscribe and thank you for viewing.